this really sagacious facility for counsel that's aimed broadly, but also very specifically this particular lens on young men and this concern that you have for the next generation. And I think the sentiment behind it is really that we have a demonstrable problem with males in the next generation, the culture of men, the evolution of men, the growth of men, who they are, where and how they are being guided or not being guided, and how they're being distracted or led astray in a way that's really interfering with their growth and their potential, and in turn, the growth of a healthy society.
First off, thanks for the kind words. I think I said when I came in, we went through all the podcast invites we have, and I just mentioned your name, and before I even finished it, half my staff just went ape shit. You deeply resonate with a lot of people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, look, this is something that I'm passionate about. I think the data is overwhelming. 3 times as likely to be addicted, 4 times as likely to kill themselves as women, 12 times likely to be incarcerated, 70% opioid overdose. We don't have a homeless problem. We don't have an opioid problem. We don't have an incarceration problem. We have a male suicide, homeless, and incarceration problem. And if any other special interest group were committing suicide at 4 times the rate of the control group, we would talk about it in different terms. We would talk about the need for social programs, intervention, empathy. But when something like this happens to young men, there's a lack of empathy. You hear words like accountability, or if they were just more in touch with their emotions. And I think that's really gotten in the way of a productive conversation. And because there hasn't been a productive conversation and people out there feel and see what's going on, some voices have entered into that void that are sort of unproductive voices. And sometimes that kind of this pro-man rhetoric oftentimes is just simply veiled misogyny or a lack of empathy or kind of what I'll call the manosphere. It starts off fine. It's be action-oriented, be fit, take control. But then it goes to really weird places that treats women as property, or talks about immigrants taking your job, or just sign up for my crypto university. It just goes to weird places.
It's also been a bit of a third rail issue to raise the peril of the wayward young man in a world in which the conversation around elevating certain sectors of culture and society is about women and people of color. Mm-hmm. And yet, the quote that I've heard you often repeat is, the most dangerous person in the world is a man that is broken and alone.
If you look globally, the most unstable, violent societies in the world all have one thing in common. They have a disproportionate amount of young men with a lack of economic or romantic prospects. What do? We send them off to war. If they don't have economic prospects internally, they'll overthrow the government. So we find conflict and we send them off to war. Also, this younger generation of men is paying for the unfair advantage you and I had growing up. I was born in Los Angeles or Southern California in 1964. I hit the lottery. Being born a white heterosexual male just had huge advantage in California.
Myself as well. I was born in '66. You went to UCLA. I went to Stanford. I'm the beneficiary of, an incredible education and privilege. And now that, access to what you and I had access to is all the more remote these days. Like, what is going on? Like, how did we get to this place? What are the tectonic plates that have led us to this situation that we find ourselves in?
So just to make the point around accessibility, I don't know the numbers in Stanford, but when I applied to UCLA in 1982, the acceptance rate was 76%, and it cost $1,200 a year. And I had to apply twice, and I got in. The acceptance rate this year will be 9%, and it's $34,000. So it's just inaccessible to anyone who's not remarkable, rich. So how did we get here? I think there's been a variety of things, a confluence of factors that have all collided around young men. One, there's just a lack of empathy. People see it as a zero-sum game where if you feel empathy for men, it must mean that you are anti-women.